welcome back to the Not Carrie Bradshaw YouTube channel. In this video, I am recapping episode 6 of I May Destroy You. So trigger warning, the show and this recap includes discussions surrounding sexual assault and rape. So if that's something that you are sensitive to, take care of yourself. Now is a good time to dip out. I will not take it personally. This episode, child, was a lot going on. I had to text a homegirl of mine who is actually watching the show ahead of me. Like I don't know if you guys know this, but the full season is available, I think, on the BBC app. So she's actually completed the season. So I text her maybe midway through, like, dude, what is going on here? Because let's just discuss. Let's dive in. So the episode opens with Kwame, T, and Arabella doing like a airbrush painting situation, and Terry is just being an insufferable bitch right now. Like, I do not want with her right now. I think her well-intentioned desire to help Arabella is making her annoying. We'll say that. And I was so bothered by what she was saying to Kwame as far as, like, you know, this concern that she had that Arabella is not really present, that she's just kind of on autopilot, which is the thing that we tend to kind of do when we've experienced trauma that we don't want to really face. You do go on autopilot. It's happened to me a few times where it's just been like, oh, well, thank you, nervous system, for getting me through. It's like a survival tactic. And what T is saying to Kwame, not knowing the trauma that Kwame has just endured with being assaulted, not being able to successfully report it, and he also has not shared that information with anyone, it's just a reminder that we have to be careful about how we judge our friends' actions, because, and we see this on Twitter all the time, but people are oftentimes dealing with things that you just may not know about, and you just have to be careful with your judgment of other people's actions, because she was saying things that were so striking that was just like, you know, this is for her because she's gone through something, and it's like, girl, he has too, which she has no way of knowing that, but we never have any way of knowing the totality of things that are going on in our friends or our loved ones' lives. Like, I have a friend who kind of parses out revealing things about her past. Me, actually, I have two friends who are like that they'll say something alluding to some sort of trauma they've experienced. I feel like I'm using the word trauma a lot, my bad, but and I'm like, girl, you ain't never told me that before. Like, but then when people feel safe enough to be vulnerable with you and they share those things with you, it's like, oh, this explains so much about, like, how you navigate the world. So Arabella decides that she's going to go to a group, and T is really, I think, number one, kind of jealous because, you know, it's her best friend and she wants to, you know, take charge of helping her heal. But then also the woman leading the group, we come to find out, is a classmate of theirs who has a bit of a rocky past in terms of sexual assault, and things get really murky when we flash back to this woman, Theo. Before we get there, I do want to say, sometimes when we go through things, you can find community in strangers before you can find community in people who you've known forever. Me personally, I had a very, very, very rough time last year around this time, dealing with, you know, cutting somebody out of my life and the way that it's rippled out into these other friendships. And I found a much greater sense of community with a woman who is now, like, one of my closest friends. We met via Twitter. She has a podcast about being single, and she just understands what it means to be a single woman of a certain age living, navigating the world in that regard. And I was able to connect with her. I was a guest on her podcast. She was a guest on mine. I was able to connect with her in ways that I was not quite able to connect with my friends from back home who I've known for most of my life, because they're not single. Most of them are married or in long-term relationships, and I felt very isolated and very alone, and kind of scared and very uncertain of like what my future looks like, and is this going to be it forever. And she helped me to really like get to a better place of being single and being happy with it, and but also being hopeful. So I said that to say that sometimes it's entirely possible to find a better sense of community with people who you don't necessarily have this strong history with, but you have a shared experience. So I think that's why Arabella was very prompted to go to this group session for survivors of sexual assault. So then we flash back to young Theo, who is the leader of this group, and she's sneaking into her parents' house. She's texting old school, Nokia. Shouts out to the old Nokias with the changing faces. She gets to school. She sneaks off to have sex with a black boy. I want to make sure that I get this chronologically correct. So, back up a little bit. She clearly has some sort of beef with her mom and is weird about her relationship with her stepdad. You can tell that she kind of likes him, but is not going to call this man her father. And then I was like, did he do something to her? Like, is this the source of her trauma? So she sneaks off to have sex with this boy. She catches the boy taking pictures of her, which is a violation. Hard stop. You do not record, take photos, anything of that nature of a person having sex without their consent. That is assault. Not okay. She tells the guy, like, she's obviously upset. He says, well, you did it with this other person, whatever, which I suppose that's coercion. But then she bargains with him for him to give her money or more money to take these pictures, to take more pictures of her. And then she throws the guy's phone out the window. And then she goes to the cafeteria to get a knife, where she then cuts herself in the bathroom. Now, what I thought was that she was self-harming. Like, there are people who are cutters. Come to find out, she lies and says that this boy raped her at knife point, and these illicit photos end up being the thing that gets him, I guess, exonerated, or, this was really confusing for me, because I'm like, well, what made her the victim? Because at a point she did consent to these photos. I felt really confused. When I zoomed out, I had a minute to think about it, and I also read another person's review, just because I want to make sure that I understood everything correctly. One thing that I do want to point out is how young we are when we start protecting black men. Arabella and T took it upon themselves to share that photo, the illicit photos of her consenting, which those photos don't prove consent, to be clear, but those photos they took them to whatever British people call, I guess, a principal. And so it's, established that Theo lied about being raped at knife point. And as she's leaving, she makes these racist comments. And two things. Number one, yes, as very young black women, we're taught to protect black men. The other thing, though, is that it was never lost on me that this boy was black and that she was white. And especially at a time right now where we're really seeing more and more evidence of how white women weaponize their tears. And young Arabella and young T are discussing the fact that if they had cried to their teacher like that, it would have been like, girl, what's wrong with you? Like, there wouldn't have been this emotional response to protect them in the way there was to protect Theo. And what's so violent to me is how deliberate and intentional she was with lying in order to get him back for what he did as far as taking these pictures. And I can't tell a victim how to feel. I can't say that that's an equal response, but I can clearly say that she lied on this boy. That's not what happened. Now, if you wanted to say something, you could say like he took, pictures of me without my permission, and then I felt like I had to. I don't know, whatever. But she lied on this boy, and I asked one of my white friends, what is it about you guys that, and maybe this wasn't an okay thing, but I needed to ask somebody who knew. What is it about white women that they cannot be confronted with their own inadequacy, with their own imperfection, with being wrong morally or technically, or what? Like, when are you taught to just cry and then you can get your way? Because I remember so early on in my life being told that crying won't get you anything. So when and where are white women taught that crying and lying, particularly on Black boys and Black men and then Black people, is a way to get what you want in the world? And she was like, you learn it from your mothers. It's these passive things that you see your mom clench her purse when a Black person walks by. You see, it's socialized into them. And it was so creepy finding out that her mom basically groomed her to lie on her biological father and say that he touched her, that he sexually abused her. And she puts her mom on blast to her stepdad when they confront her about, like, why would you choose to do this to someone when you yourself were sexually assaulted? And she's very flippant about revealing to her stepfather that, like, my dad never touched me, and I would really still like to have him in my life, but your wife, when I was 7, told me to lie. He never lifted a finger to either of us, and now he's not a part of our lives, but you make more money, so this is a better situation for her. So what I'm thinking is that her root issue is that she was taught that she could lie to get what she wanted, or to get back at someone, because apparently her mom told her to lie about this in order to get full custody of her. So her mom taught her at a very young age to lie in order to get what you want. Consequences be damned. And that, to me, is a separate kind of violation than actually being raped. She has absolutely experienced a parental trauma surrounding sexual assault, but she herself wasn't. So I'm like, what makes her qualified, I guess, to lead this group? And to hear her repeat that intro, so not even robotically, she seems very empathetic when she's doing it at the beginning of the group, where she talks about how she hates abusers and things like that. And it's just like, whoa, how did you arrive here? And Arabella, and to circle back, Arabella and Terry know that she lied about being raped. So it did give more credence to T's question of, like, why would you go to a group led by her of all people? And initially I was just like, well, you're being kind of a judgmental bitch. But it does kind of make sense. And when I was texting my homegirl, I was like, wow, my homegirl pointed out that it's like she's walking back into being violated by people. And my god sister, who's a therapist, and my own therapist, has made it very clear that our trauma manifests itself in so many different ways. And I should have like a trauma counter, like how many times I use that word at the bottom of the screen. Sorry, y'all. I will look up synonyms. I will TI for y'all. But when we experience a root traumatic event in our lives, we will subconsciously repeat that event until we fix it. I have done that so much in my dating life. I kept dating the same kind of emotionally unavailable man until I got to a point where it was just like, you're not going to change these men. You can change yourself, and you can start seeking people who are emotionally available so that you can break this cycle. But if you are not cognizant of where this is coming from, or even that you are repeating, I don't want to use that language, but Arabella has been raped twice, and now she's going to another untrustworthy person with very personal and sensitive information. And she's not in this group alone. There are other survivors in this group who, we can only assume they're telling the truth, because we need to get to a place where we believe victims before we question the legitimacy of their stories. But I was like, wow, this episode has so much going on, because the race dynamic does play such a huge role. And had it not been for those pictures that were actually a violation off rip, that boy's life could have been ruined. And I was floored, because I was kind of like, okay, how did she arrive here? So how did Theo get to be this like person who's like leading this group? And like, why would you, if you lied on this boy, who, I guess my question is, who does Theo consider to be her abuser? Her mom? Because that would make sense. But I didn't think to classify what her mom did as a sexual assault. I don't know. It's a lot to unpack in this episode. Yeah, it was, yeah. So I'm curious to see what's gonna happen. Like if this was a one episode situation with Theo, are we gonna see her again later? Yeah, I don't know. Like, if you know that this person lied about a sexual assault, why would you walk into a situation with her where you have been sexually assaulted? So we'll see what happens. Thank you guys for tuning in again. The show continues to keep me on my toes in terms of how I think about sexual assault and victims, and what we're socialized to believe and things like that. So I think that it was an important episode nonetheless, because at least we're kind of talking about some of the different dynamics that go into shaping the way white women navigate the world. Like, child, what? So yeah, come back next week and we will continue to unpack all the many things that happen in this series. Be sure to subscribe to my channel, like, comment, share, let me know what you guys thought, and I'll see you guys again next week. Bye.